The wind was already inside the house before she opened the door. Late October. The kind of October that strips the maples bare in a single afternoon, that turns the lawns of Hawthorne Ridge the color of old pennies, that carries the smell of wood smoke down 2 miles of stone walls and locked iron gates. Down one of those lanes, past the magazine-perfect house with the glossy black sedan in the circular driveway, down the overgrown path nobody walked anymore, through the thorns and the wild rose and the 50 years of forgetting, to a brick building with a sagging roof and a door that had not been opened in a very long time. And the brass key, old, ornate, warm in a hand that had no business being warm. She turned it. The lock fought back. 18 years old. $175 in her pocket. A cardboard box at her feet. And beneath the floor inside, something her father had been hiding. The day Adeline Whitmore turned 18, the state of Illinois handed her a cardboard box and called it a life. No cake, no candles, no song, just a box. She stood in the linoleum foyer of the Grayson Group Home for Girls, holding that box against her chest like a baby. The cardboard was thin. The bottom sagged. Inside were 3 changes of clothes, 4 paperback books with broken spines, a hairbrush missing half its bristles, and a small frame photo of a man holding a little girl on his shoulders at a county fair. The man was her father. The little girl was her before the world remembered to forget about her. Ms. Delaney stood across from her with a clipboard pressed to her chest. She had a tired face, a tired that lived behind the eyes, a tired that sleep cannot fix. "That's it then, Adeline," Ms. Delaney said. Her voice was flat, but not unkind. Addie nodded. She couldn't trust her throat to make words. The hallway smelled like bleach and boiled cabbage, the same way it had smelled every single day for the last 730 days of her life. She had counted them. Every one. "There's a bed waiting for you at the North Side shelter," Ms. Delaney said. "Paid for 1 week. After that, you work with their counselors. There's a bus ticket in your envelope. And a check." Addie nodded again. The check was for $175. That was the price of her childhood. That was what the state of Illinois had decided she was worth on the morning of her 18th birthday. 1 check, 1 bus ticket, 1 cardboard box. "Thank you, ma'am," Addie said. The words came out small. They felt small. Because she didn't know what else to say. Because the woman in front of her had done her job, and the job was over, and Addie was about to walk out the door and disappear into a city of 3 million strangers. One more thing. Miss Delaney was reaching for something. Not the clipboard. A drawer. She pulled out a white envelope, and the envelope was wrong. The paper was thick, cream-colored. Paper that came from places where people used silver letter openers and called their lawyers by their first names. Addie's name was typed on the front. Adeline Whitmore. Each letter crisp. Each one centered. "This came for you yesterday." Ms. Delaney held it out. Addie did not take it right away. Because she was afraid. Because envelopes like that did not arrive for girls like her. Not in places like this. Envelopes like that arrived for people in big houses with big lawns and big lives. Not for a girl with a cardboard box. From who? Addie whispered. A law firm. Ms. Delaney's voice was careful. From your old hometown. Hawthorne Ridge. Hawthorne Ridge. The name hit her like a door slamming shut. She hadn't heard those two words spoken aloud in 3 years. 3 years and 4 months. She had not let herself think them. She had pushed them down, buried them, pretended the place did not exist. But it did exist. It had always existed. It was where her father had died. It was where her brothers had sold the house and signed the papers and told the judge they could not in good conscience care for their 15-year-old sister. It was where they had erased her. Addie's hand closed around the envelope. The paper was so heavy it felt like a small stone. Do you know what it says? She asked. Ms. Delaney shook her head. That's not my place, Adeline. And then softly, almost shy. Good luck. You're tougher than you think. Addie wanted to believe her. She really did. But as she stepped out the heavy front door and into a sharp October wind that cut straight through her thin jacket, she did not feel tough. She felt like a ghost. She felt like a leaf that had finally let go of the tree. She walked to the bus stop with the cardboard box under one arm and the envelope clenched in her fist. 2 blocks, 3 traffic lights. A man asked her for spare change, and she could not even look at him because she had less than he did, and she did not know how to say so. The bus came. She got on. She found a seat by the window, and she sat down to ride away from the only life she'd been allowed to know. The window was grimy. The glass shook against her forehead. The city slid past in long gray ribbons, and Addie pressed the envelope against her chest and held her breath until the bus left the curb. She did not open it right away. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But she was afraid of what it would say, because envelopes like that came in 2 flavors and only 2. Either it was a miracle, or it was a knife. And she had been knifed enough. So she sat there. For 1 stop. For 2. For 5. The cardboard box on her lap. The envelope against her heart. And her mind went where minds go when the body has nothing left to do. It went home. Not to the Grayson Group Home for Girls. Home. The real one. The one with the wraparound porch and the white shutters and the maple tree that turned the color of a sunset in October. The one with the kitchen where her father had taught her to crack eggs without breaking the yolk. The one with the back staircase that creaked on the 3rd step from the top. Her father, Alaric Whitmore, had been a tall man. Not movie tall. Real tall. The tall that ducked under doorways without thinking. He had a laugh that came from his belly. He had hands the size of dinner plates. He smelled like cedar and old books and the cologne his mother had given him for Christmas in 1979. The same bottle he used until the end, because Alaric Whitmore did not see the point of changing things that worked. He had called her his little spark plug because she had asked too many questions, because she had not let things rest. What's that bird, she would say. Cardinal. Why is it red? To make the ladybirds notice him. Why don't ladybirds have to be red? Because they're busy doing the real work spark plug. And he would laugh, and he would scoop her up, and the world would feel like the safest place that had ever existed, until he got sick, until the word cancer entered the house and would not leave, until the chemotherapy made his hair fall out in soft white drifts on the bathroom tile. And Addie was 11 years old and did not understand why God was doing this to a man whose only sin was making pot roast on Sundays. He fought it for 4 years. 4 years of treatments. 4 years of remissions. 4 years of hope and crash and hope again. He kept working when he could. He kept laughing when he could. He kept calling her spark plug right up until the morphine made his mouth stop forming words. And then, one Tuesday morning in March, he was gone. Addie was 15, and the world had gone gray. She had 2 brothers. Garrett, the oldest, was 27 that year. Tobias, who everyone called Toby, was 25. They had moved out of the house years before. They had wives back then. Well, Garrett had a wife. Toby had a string of girlfriends who never stayed long enough to remember the dog's name. Addie had been a surprise, a late-life baby. Their father had been 46 when she was born, their mother 43. Their mother had died of an aneurysm when Addie was 4. Just dropped, right in the middle of folding laundry. So it had been her and her dad, just the 2 of them, for 11 years. She had loved her brothers the way a little sister loves big brothers who only show up at Christmas. She had loved the idea of them. She had loved their stories. She had not really known them. She would learn. The funeral was a Wednesday. Pouring rain. Garrett wore a gray suit and held a black umbrella over his wife's blonde head. Toby wore a black suit and did not bring anyone. They both stood under the canopy. Addie stood in the rain. Nobody offered her room under their umbrella, and she did not ask. She remembers thinking, even then, that something was wrong. The next week, in a lawyer's office on the 18th floor of a building in Chicago. A lawyer she had never seen before. A lawyer named, she would later learn, Theodore Marsh. He read the will. He read fast. He used a lot of words Addie did not understand. Estate, probate, liquidation, outstanding obligations. When he finished, Garrett cleared his throat. He looked at Addie. He had the same gray eyes as their father, only colder, only flatter, only farther away. "Addie, sweetheart," he said, "the thing is, Dad's medical bills were astronomical. The business is in trouble. After everything is paid out, there isn't much left. Toby and I have talked about it. We can't take you in. Toby's got the apartment in the city. I've got the boys. There's no room. There's no money." She remembers Toby, sitting beside him, nodding, not looking up. She remembers asking, "Where will I go?" She remembers Garrett saying, "The state will help." The state. He had said it like a kind word. He had said it like he was handing her a gift. She did not cry in that office. She did not cry on the elevator. She did not cry when the social worker came to pick her up the next morning with a suitcase she had packed by herself. She cried finally 3 days later, in the bathroom of an emergency placement home, with the door locked, with the water running. Because the girl in the next room had been screaming for an hour, and Addie had finally understood that her brothers had not just abandoned her, they had thrown her away. 3 years passed. 3 placements. 3 group homes. 3 sets of strangers calling her sweetie and meaning none of it. She got through it the way you get through anything. One breath, one meal, one night, she read books. She kept her head down. She did her homework. She did not make friends because friends got moved and getting moved felt like dying. She survived. And now she was 18. And now she was on a bus. And now there was an envelope in her hands. The bus rumbled. Her stomach rumbled. She had not eaten since 6 in the morning, and the bus station vending machine had taken her dollar and given her nothing. She could not wait anymore. Her fingers, cold and clumsy, found the flap. She slid one nail under the seal. The paper resisted, then tore. She unfolded the letter. Henderson and Whitlock, attorneys at law. She read. She read again. She did not understand. Then, slowly, she did. She read it a third time, slower, word by word, the way you read instructions for something dangerous. "Dear Ms. Whitmore," it began, "this letter is to inform you of a matter pertaining to the final will and testament of your late father, Mr. Alaric Whitmore. While the primary assets of the estate were dispersed in accordance with probate court rulings 3 years ago, a codicil to the will pertaining to you specifically has now come into effect upon the occasion of your 18th birthday." A codicil. A codicil. Addie did not know what a codicil was, but the word felt important. The word felt like a door she had not known existed. She kept reading. "Pursuant to your father's directive, a single property held in a separate trust was to be transferred to your name upon reaching the age of legal majority. This property is listed in the county records as Lot 7B, the detached carriage house and adjoining 1/10 acre, located at the northeast corner of the original Whitmore estate at 412 Cedar Hollow Lane, Hawthorne Ridge." The carriage house. She knew the carriage house. It was the brick building at the back of the property, half hidden by a thicket of overgrown maples. The place where Mr. Powell, the old groundskeeper, had stored lawnmowers and bags of mulch. The upstairs had been a tiny apartment, but nobody had lived in it since before Addie was born. It had been dust and cobwebs and an old wood stove that did not work. It was a shed. Her father had left her a shed. A laugh came out of her, sharp, ugly. A laugh that turns into a cry if you let it. The man sitting 2 rows in front of her turned to look. She covered her mouth. She did not let the cry come. Because she was not going to fall apart on a Greyhound bus in front of a stranger in a stained Bears jersey. She kept reading. "Please be advised that the property is conveyed as is with all associated responsibilities, including property taxes, which are currently delinquent in the amount of approximately $823. The trust contains no liquid assets. We advise you to contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the transfer of the deed and your intentions regarding the property. Sincerely, Edmund Whitlock, Esquire. Delinquent. $823. She did the math. She had $175 in her envelope, plus the bus ticket, which she had already used. 175 minus 823 was a number that did not exist for a girl like her. It was not an inheritance. It was a bill. It was a final sneering joke from a family that had decided she was a problem to be solved and not a daughter to be loved. A laugh from beyond the grave. A pat on the head with a fist inside the glove. She crumpled the letter in her hand. The thick paper made an angry sound. She pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched her own breath fog the glass. And then she stopped. Because of one sentence, she uncrumpled the letter. She smoothed it on her knee. She read again. Pursuant to your father's directive. Her father's directive, not her brother's, her father. Her father had put this in the will. Her father had walked into a lawyer's office while he was dying and said, "Hold on to this. Don't tell her. Wait until she's 18. Give her the carriage house. Why? Why a shed? Why now? Why him?" She pulled the cheap flip phone from her pocket, the one Ms. Delaney had given her with 100 prepaid minutes. The numbers on the letterhead. Edmund Whitlock, Esquire. She dialed. The phone rang once, twice. A bright professional voice. "Henderson and Whitlock, may I help you?" "I'd like to speak with Edmund Whitlock, please." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "My name is Adeline Whitmore." A pause. A long pause. "One moment, Ms. Whitmore." The line clicked. Music. Some kind of orchestra, soft and forgettable. Then, a man's voice. Deep, slow, calm in a way that felt practiced. "Miss Whitmore. Adeline. This is Edmund Whitlock. I have been waiting for your call." "Sir, Are you somewhere safe?" She blinked. "I'm on a bus." "Where's the bus going?" She did not answer right away, because she did not know. "It's going to a shelter," she said, finally. "In the city." A silence. She could hear him breathing. He was thinking. "Adeline," he said. "May I call you Adeline?" "Yes, sir." "Adeline, your father was my friend for more than 30 years. We met when we were both younger than you are now. I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because your father was very specific about how this was to go. He left strict instructions. He told me when to write you. He told me what to say. He told me what not to say." Her breath caught. "What didn't he tell you to say?" she whispered. A pause. "He told me Edmund said that you would know how to find things. That's what he said. He said, Edmund Addy always knew how to find things. So I am not allowed to tell you anything more than what is in that letter. I'm sorry. I gave him my word." She squeezed her eyes shut. "How much are the taxes?" $823. "I don't have that." "I understand. I will lose it. You have 90 days. The bus hit a pothole. Her cardboard box slid on her lap. She caught it. "Mr. Whitlock," she said, and her voice was almost a whisper. "Is there a key?" She heard him smile through the phone. Actually, smile. Like a sound. "Yes," he said. "He told me where he left it. The key is in a small magnetic lockbox attached to the back of the electrical meter on the side of the carriage house. You will need a steady hand." "Okay." "Adeline." "Yes, sir. You don't have to come back. You can keep going to the shelter. The carriage house will be auctioned in 90 days if you do nothing. The state will buy it. The state will tear it down. The state will sell the lot to your brothers. And the story will end. She thought about that for a long moment, for longer than she had thought about anything in 3 years. "Mr. Whitlock," she said, "where does the bus to Hawthorne Ridge leave from?" He gave her the address. She hung up. The bus pulled into the depot a few minutes later, a great gray exhaust-stained terminal under a low Chicago sky. She stood up. Her legs were stiff. Her cardboard box weighed more than it had an hour ago. She walked through the depot, past the door that led to the city, past the door that led to the shelter, past the door that led to the small, sad, predictable rest of her life. She walked to the ticket counter. A woman with tired eyes and a name tag that said, "Trish." "One way to Hawthorne Ridge, please." Trish looked her up and down, took in the cheap jacket, the cardboard box, the hair that had not been cut by anyone who liked her in 3 years. $42, hon. $42. Almost a quarter of her entire net worth. She counted out the bills. 20s first, then a 10, then 2 ones from a little zippered pocket. Trish slid the ticket under the glass. "Bus leaves in 20 minutes. Platform 3. "Thank you, ma'am." She walked to Platform 3. She sat on a cold metal bench. And for the first time in 3 years, the fear in her chest had a friend. The friend was small. The friend was quiet. The friend was nothing more than a flicker, really. But it was there. The friend was hope. The bus to Hawthorne Ridge took 2 hours. 2 hours of suburbs giving way to gentler suburbs. Gentler suburbs giving way to country roads. Country roads giving way to the long stone walls and tall iron gates and the old, deep, money-soaked silence of the place where she had been born. She watched the world get richer through the window. She watched the trees get taller. She watched the houses get further from the road, and she felt every mile the strange double thing of going back to a place that no longer belonged to her. The bus dropped her at the small white station in the center of town. She stepped out. The air smelled different, cleaner, colder, like leaves and money. The sky over Hawthorne Ridge was the same sky as Chicago, but it felt taller somehow. It felt watched. The Whitmore estate was 2 miles away, 2 miles on foot. She started walking. Her boots were old. Her box was awkward. Her envelope was still in her jacket pocket. She walked down Main Street past the bakery where her father had bought her sticky buns on Saturday mornings, past the bookstore with the cat in the window, past the corner where a man in a striped apron used to sell roasted chestnuts in November, although she didn't see him today, and maybe he didn't do that anymore. And maybe none of this was the same as she remembered. She turned onto Mulberry Lane. She walked past the park where her father had taught her to ride a bike. There was a bench by the duck pond, and she remembered him sitting on it, one hand on the small of her back, as she wobbled past both of them, yelling like idiots until the moment her feet found the pedals and she rode straight into a holly bush. He had laughed for a week about that. She kept walking. She passed the little ice cream shop. Sundays on Sunday. Closed for the season. Her father had taken her there every time she brought home a good report card. and good report cards had not been rare. He had always ordered the mint chocolate chip. She had always ordered the strawberry. The wind picked up. Her eyes stung. She kept walking. The houses got bigger. The hedges got taller. She turned onto Cedar Hollow Lane, and then there it was, 412 Cedar Hollow, the house she had grown up in. It was larger than she remembered, or maybe she had just shrunk. The white paint was fresh and bright. The black shutters had been replaced. There was a circular driveway, and in the driveway was a glossy black sedan with a vanity plate she could not read from the road. The house looked perfect. It looked like a magazine. It looked like a place where no child had ever spilled juice on the rug. No man had ever sat on the back porch with a glass of whiskey and his bare feet on the railing and told stories about his own father. The house looked clean. The house looked dead. She did not go up the front walk. She did not stand in the driveway. She did not stare at the windows long enough to wonder which one of her brothers had taken her father's bedroom. She turned. She walked along the stone wall. She walked until she reached the place where, years ago, there had been a small white gate. The gate was still there, but it was choked with vines. The latch was rusted shut. She set her cardboard box on the ground. She climbed the gate. She landed in tall, wet grass on the other side. The carriage house path was a memory more than a path. It had been a clean gravel walk when she was a child, lined with pots of marigolds in the summer. Now it was a thicket, wild rose, honeysuckle gone feral, maple saplings as thick as her wrist. She picked up her cardboard box. She walked. Branches caught her sleeves. Thorns pulled at her jeans. She did not feel them. She felt the ground under her feet. She felt the trees over her head. She felt the strange, hushed weight of a place that had been left alone for so long. It had forgotten people existed. And then she rounded a curve, and she saw it. The carriage house. It was smaller than her memory. It was darker than her memory. It was a brick building 2 stories tall with a sagging slate roof and ivy, climbing all the way up the side walls almost to the eaves. 2 windows on the second floor had been boarded over. The wood had gone gray with weather. The mortar between the bricks was crumbling. It was a ruin. It was hers. She stood there a long time. The wind moved through the maple leaves overhead. Somewhere far away, a dog barked twice. The wind kept moving. Then she walked around to the side. The electrical meter was where she remembered, bolted to the brick. Beneath it, a thicket of dead morning glory vines had grown up and tangled themselves around the conduit. She knelt. She pulled the vines back. She slid her hand behind the meter box. Her fingers found cold metal. A small, flat, magnetic case. She tugged. It came free with a soft click. She held it up to the gray afternoon light. She popped the lid. Inside, on a small piece of crumbling yellow foam, was a brass key. Old, ornate, heavier than a key had any right to be. A key that belonged in a movie about a haunted house. She closed her hand around it. The key was warm. That was impossible. The key had been sitting in a metal box behind an electrical meter in a thicket of dead vines in the November wind. The key had to be cold, but it felt warm. She did not let herself think about that. She walked around to the front. There was a heavy wooden door, the kind with iron hinges, the kind that had been built by someone who expected it to last 100 years. She slid the key into the lock. She turned. The lock resisted. She turned harder. The lock resisted harder. She put her shoulder into it. She put her body into it. She put 3 years of group homes and one mean caseworker and one cheating boyfriend at her last placement, and the entire weight of her brother's faces in that lawyer's office into it. The lock gave way with a deep echoing clunk. She pushed the door. It groaned open into the dark. She stepped inside, and the smell hit her like a wall. Old earth, old wood, damp brick, the dry husk of a mouse that had died somewhere a long time ago, the thin, sharp sour of a place that had been sealed up and left to think about itself. She breathed it in. It was not a good smell, but it was hers. The ground floor was a single open room, stone floor, brick walls. The wooden ceiling beams overhead were thick and dark with age. A wheelbarrow with one flat tire leaned against the far wall. 2 old horse stalls, partly collapsed, gave the place the feel of a story that had stopped being told a long time ago. She walked slowly. Her boots crunched on grit and dead leaves. Her eyes adjusted. Light came in through 3 small, grimy windows on the long wall. The light was the color of dirty milk. In the corner, a wooden staircase climbed up to the 2nd floor. She tested the bottom step with her foot. It held. She climbed. The stairs creaked. The handrail wobbled. A spider the size of a quarter sat on the wall and watched her pass. She did not scream. She did not have it in her to scream. At the top, a small landing. A door. She opened it. The apartment was 1 room. A small kitchenette at one end. A bathroom door at the other. A wood stove in the corner. A couch with a faded floral pattern that might have been pink once before the dust. A wobbly table. 1 chair. A metal bed frame with no mattress. A dead bird on the windowsill. It was the saddest room she had ever been in, and she had been in some sad rooms. She set her cardboard box on the floor. The sound echoed. She walked to the window. She looked out. She could see the back of the big house through the bare trees. The lights were on. Someone was home. She turned away. She went to the couch. She sat down. The cushions sighed under her. Dust rose up in a small gray cloud. And then, finally, after 3 years, she let herself cry. Not a movie cry. A real cry. A cry from deep in her chest, where the small girl on her father's shoulders was still waiting for someone to come pick her up. She cried for her father. She cried for her mother. She cried for her brothers who had been good men once, or at least had pretended well enough. She cried for the 11-year-old who had cracked eggs without breaking the yolk. She cried for the 15-year-old who had stood in the rain at a funeral. She cried for the 18-year-old who had spent her last $42 to come to a place that didn't want her. She cried for a long time. When she stopped, the room was darker. The afternoon had folded itself away. The light through the dirty windows was the color of slate. She wiped her face with her sleeve. She breathed. She lay down on the couch. She pulled her thin jacket tighter. She closed her eyes. Maybe she would sleep here tonight. It was better than a shelter, she told herself. At least here, the failure was hers alone. Her elbow knocked the floor next to the couch. Thunk. She opened her eyes. It was a different sound. Hollow. She knocked again, with her knuckle this time. Slowly. Thunk. Thunk. On the regular floorboards. Thump. Thump. On one board. Just one. A small one. Maybe 2 feet long. Right next to the couch. She sat up. She knelt. She ran her fingers along the board. The wood was old dark, gritted with dust. But the gap on one side where the board met its neighbor was just a hair wider than it should have been. Like the board had been lifted once. Like it had been put back, but not quite the same. She dug her fingernails into the gap. She pulled. Nothing. She looked around the room. In the corner, half buried under a coil of rotting rope, she saw an old rusted tire iron. She grabbed it. The weight of it felt good in her hand. She wedged the flat end into the gap. She leaned. The wood groaned. Then, with a sharp crack, the board popped up. She stared. Beneath the board in the floor was a small, dark cavity. And in the cavity, wrapped in a piece of stiff, oil-darkened canvas, was a green metal box. It was the size of a small briefcase. The lid was hinged. There was no lock, just 2 heavy latches on the front. Military, maybe. Surplus. Her father had kept fishing tackle in a box just like it. Her hands shook. She lifted the box out. It was heavier than it looked. She set it on the dusty floor. The light from the dirty window was almost gone now. There was just enough to see by. She wiped the dust from the lid. She flipped the latches. They snapped open with a sound that was very loud in a very quiet room. She lifted the lid. And what she saw inside her father's box was not what she had expected. Not at all. She stared. She blinked. She breathed in. She breathed out. She did not yet know what any of it meant. She did not yet know that her whole life was about to split in two. There would be Adeline before she opened this box, and Adeline after she opened this box, and the woman she would become would not be the girl on the bus, and the girl on the bus would never come back. But she did not know that yet. She only knew in this moment, in this dust, in this dying light, in this small, forgotten room at the back of a stolen estate, that her father had left her something, that her father had not forgotten her, that the man who had held her on his shoulders at the county fair had been thinking of her somewhere, somehow in the last terrible months of his life, thinking of her hard enough to hide a box under a floorboard in a building everyone else had decided was worthless, thinking of her hard enough to bet the rest of her life on a single sentence. She knew how to find things. He had said so. And now, in the silver-blue dusk of a November evening in the carriage house at the back of 412 Cedar Hollow Lane in the town of Hawthorne Ridge, on the first day of the rest of her life, Adeline Whitmore had found something. She reached into the box. Her fingers brushed paper. Thick, cream-colored, heavy. the same paper as the letter from the lawyer. Her name was on the front of an envelope. Adeline, written in her father's hand. She held the envelope. She did not open it yet. She just held it. And outside, the wind moved through the dry maple leaves, and the lights came on in the big house across the lawn. And somewhere a clock she could not see chimed the hour, and the world tilted softly toward whatever was coming next. She held the envelope for a long time, because the moment she opened it, the world would change. And Adeline Whitmore had learned in 3 years of group homes that you do not rush the moments before a change. You stand on the bridge. You look at both sides. You breathe. The envelope was heavy. The handwriting was her father's. She traced the letters of her own name with one fingertip. Adeline. He had written the D like a small circle. He had always written the D like a small circle. She had not seen his handwriting in 3 years and 4 months, and her body remembered it before her mind did. Her throat closed up. She broke the seal. Inside were many pages. She counted them later. 23. Her father had written her 23 pages. She unfolded the first one. The light was almost gone. She moved closer to the window. She held the paper up to the gray smudge of evening sky. She read, "My dearest Adeline, my little spark plug. If you are reading this, it means several things. It means you are 18. It means you are strong enough and clever enough to have found this place in this box. And it means I am gone." She stopped. She breathed. She kept reading. "I am so sorry that I had to leave you. There is not a day as I write this that my heart does not break, knowing I will not see you grow into the woman I know you are becoming. I will not walk you down an aisle if you choose one. I will not meet your children if you have them. I will not hear the books you write or read the things you build or watch the world get a little bit better, because you arrived in it. I am sorry, Sparkplug. I am so very sorry." She put the page down. She put her face in her hands. She cried in the dark for a while, not loud, just shaking. A cry of grief that had been waiting under a door for 3 years. And you have finally turned the knob. When she could see again, she picked up the next page. "I know you must have questions. I know you must be angry. I know you must feel that I abandoned you. I need you to listen to me now, Adeline. None of it was what it seemed." She read. She read for hours. She read through the small box of waterproof matches her father had thoughtfully included in the metal box. She struck one. She lit the kerosene lantern she found on the shelf above the wood stove. She trimmed the wick. The light was small, but it was honest. She read by lantern light. She read about her brothers. She read about Garrett, who had been a beautiful baby and a thoughtful boy, and a fine young man, until he had not been. Who had decided somewhere in his late 20s that the world had not given him what he deserved. Who had started looking at his father's business not as a legacy, but as a prize. Who had started looking at his little sister not as a person, but as a problem. She read about Tobias. Toby is weak, sweetheart. He is not the bad one. He is the one who goes along. Garrett tells him what to do, and Toby does it. There is still a chance for him, but only if he ever finds his own spine. And I am not optimistic. I love him. I want you to know that. I loved him every day of his life. But I saw what he was, and I could not pretend I did not. She read about the diagnosis, about the bow. When they told me, the first thing I felt was not fear. The first thing I felt was the calendar. I started counting backward from your 18th birthday. I had 4 years, maybe. I had to plan. She read about the plan. I went to Edmund Whitlock. You met him. The man on the phone. He is the best friend I have. He has been my best friend since we were 20 years old. I told him everything. I told him what your brothers were doing. I told him what I needed. What was Garrett doing? She had not asked that yet. She turned the page. For the last 2 years of my life, while your brothers were running the day-to-day of the company because I was too sick to do it, they were also stealing from it. I want to be very specific, Adeline. I am not guessing. I am not bitter. I am telling you a fact. They set up shell corporations. They funneled money offshore. They falsified invoices. They told me every quarter that the company was barely surviving the cost of my medical bills. They were lying. She gripped the page. By the time I figured it out, I was too sick to fight. I could barely sit at a desk. I could not have walked into a courtroom and survived a deposition. They would have buried me in motions. They would have waited me out. They would have won. So he had done something different. I let them think they had won. I let the business look ruined. I quietly liquidated a separate account I had been keeping for 30 years. An account my father had opened for me when I was a boy. Your brothers did not know about it. I converted it to cash. I put the cash in the box you are now holding. I put the carriage house in a separate trust legally walled off from the estate where they could not touch it. I made it look worthless. I let the taxes go unpaid. I made it the kind of property a greedy man would not bother to want. She stopped. She put the page on her lap. She turned and looked at the dusty, broken dining room she was sitting in. He had made it look worthless. He had succeeded. And then, my darling, I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I let you go. She did not move. I knew when I was gone that your brothers would not take you in. I knew because I had asked them when I still had the strength to ask. And the look on Garrett's face had told me everything. I knew you would go into the system. I knew it would be terrible. I knew you would feel abandoned. I knew you would hate me maybe for letting it happen. And I did it anyway because the alternative was worse. The alternative was that they kept you. The alternative was that they used you the way they use me. The alternative was that you grew up under Garrett's roof, hearing him talk about money and power, and how the world owes a man what he wants. The alternative was that they took what little I had managed to hide and they took your spirit with it. He had let her be a problem so she could be free. He had let her be alone so she could remain herself. I knew you would survive the system spark plug. I knew because I raised you. I knew because you were always the smartest kid in the room even when you didn't say a word. I knew because the night your mother died you were 4 years old, and you walked into my study and you handed me a tissue. A tissue. At 4 years old. You knew I was crying before I knew I was crying. You have always known things, Adeline. You have always known how to find what other people could not see. She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. So I let you go. and I left you a map. The map was the carriage house. The map was the floorboard. The map was the lantern by the stove. The map was the box. The map was this letter. The map was the choice you are about to make. The choice. She had almost forgotten there was a choice. She turned the page. In this box, you will find money. There is, by my last count, just under $38,000 in cash. It is not a fortune. It will not buy you a mansion, but it is clean. It is yours. It is enough to pay the taxes on the carriage house. It is enough to live on carefully for a year. It is enough to start. That is all I wanted to give you, Sparkplug. A start. $38,000. She glanced at the box. She had not even counted the money. She had not even looked at it again since she had seen it. $38,000. She had never in her life held more than $217 at one time. And that had been a birthday card from an aunt she barely remembered when she was 12. But there is something else in the box, Adeline. Underneath the money, a second envelope, sealed with wax. You will know it when you see it. Do not open it yet. Read the rest of this letter first. She looked. There it was, beneath the bundles of cash. A smaller envelope, cream paper. A circle of red wax on the flap pressed with a letter W. She did not touch it yet. She kept reading. The second envelope contains evidence. All of the evidence. The wire transfers, the fake invoices, the names of the shell corporations, the bank accounts, the dates, the amounts. Enough to put your brothers in federal prison for 15 to 20 years. Enough to claw back through the civil courts every cent of what they stole, which is, in my best estimation, somewhere between $4 and $7 million. $4 and $7 million. The numbers did not feel real. They felt like things from a movie. They felt like things from someone else's life. Adeline, my little spark plug, listen to me. This is the most important thing I will ever say to you. The envelope is yours. The decision is yours. I am not going to tell you what to do. She held her breath. You can take that envelope to the FBI. You can take it to the U.S. Attorney's office. You can hand it to Edmund and he will know who to call. Your brothers will be arrested. The company will be put into receivership. The civil case will take years, but eventually you will win. You will get the house back. You will get the business back. You will get the family name back. You will have what is rightfully yours. A pause in the page. A space. As if her father had stopped writing for a moment and thought, and then continued. Or just that one word on its own line. Or you can keep the carriage house. You can pay the taxes. You can fix the roof. You can plant flowers in the small patch of dirt outside the door. You can take the money in the box and you can build a life, a small life, a free life, a life that is not about them at all. She read it again. She read it a third time. I do not know which one is right, Adeline. I have lain awake for many nights trying to know. I am writing this letter and I still do not know. Maybe by the time you read it, I will have decided. But here is the truth. If I tell you what to do, then the decision is mine. And I have made too many decisions for you already. I have already chosen a system. I have already chosen a separation. I have already chosen what you got to know and what you did not. I am tired, Sparkplug. I am tired of choosing for you. The last thing I have to give you is a choice." The lantern flickered. She did not move. One path is justice. One path is peace. They are not the same path. They are not even close. The path of justice will take years. It will be public. It will be ugly. It will define you. The path of peace will be small and quiet and probably lonely sometimes, and nobody will write a newspaper article about you. And your brothers will go on with their lives until something else catches up to them. Or maybe nothing will. And they will die rich and old, and not understanding why their children do not call. I do not know which is better. I do not know which I would choose if I were you. I only know that you are the one who has to live with it. She closed her eyes. Whatever you choose, my darling, I am proud of you. Whatever you choose, I have always loved you. Whatever you choose, you are my little spark plug, and you have always been and you always will be. Your father. She did not put the letter down. She held it in her lap for a long time. The lantern burned. The wind moved against the boarded windows. The carriage house creaked the way old buildings creak at night. The way wood remembers the weight of every person who has ever stood on it. She did not cry anymore. She had no more crying in her that night. She just sat. She looked at the small wax-sealed envelope in the box. She did not touch it. She closed the lid of the box. She set the box on the floor next to the couch. She stretched out on the cushions. She pulled her thin jacket over her like a blanket. She slept. It was the deepest sleep she had ever had, because for the first time in 3 years, she was not alone in the room. Her father was in the room. He was in every word on every page. He had been thinking of her. He had always been thinking of her. Morning came in pale and slow, light through the dirty window, dust dancing in the beam, a bird outside somewhere in the maples, making the soft chuckling sound that the wrens used to make on her father's porch. She sat up. Her body ached in 14 places. She looked around. The room looked smaller in daylight, dustier, more broken. She could see now the water stains on the ceiling, the crack in the wall by the window, the corner where mice had eaten through the baseboard. She also saw for the first time the small frame photograph on the shelf above the stove. She got up. She walked over. She lifted it down. She blew dust off the glass. It was her. She was 3, maybe 4. She was sitting on a wooden floor holding a yellow stuffed duck, smiling at the camera with 2 front teeth missing. She was wearing pajamas with little ladybugs on them. She had never seen the picture before. Her father had kept it. In the carriage house. In a place no one else came. He had set it on the shelf for her to find. She held the picture for a long time. Then she set it back on the shelf. Carefully. Right in the middle. Where it belonged. She walked downstairs. She used the small, terrible bathroom. The water in the pipes coughed for almost a minute, then ran a rusty brown, then cleared. There was no hot water. She washed her face in cold. She brushed her teeth with one of the paperback, book-sized travel tubes the group home had given her. She went back upstairs. She opened the metal box again. She counted the money. It took an hour. $37,980. Almost exactly what he had said. She did not touch the wax-sealed envelope. She did, however, take $823 in worn $100 bills, fold them carefully, and put them in the inside pocket of her jacket. Then she added 100 more just in case. Then she added another 100 for food. She closed the box. She put it back under the floorboard. She set the broken board carefully on top. She set the rotting rope back over it. Then she walked into Hawthorne Ridge. The county clerk's office opened at 9. She was there at 5 minutes till. She stood on the front steps in the cold and tried not to look like a person who had slept on a couch in a building with no heat. She had brushed her hair. She had washed her face again. She still looked like what she was. A woman in a pink cardigan opened the door at 9. "Help you, hon? I need to pay back taxes on a property. Address? 412 Cedar Hollow Lane, Lot 7B, the carriage house." The woman looked at her, long, slow. "You're related to the Whitmores." "I am a Whitmore." The woman blinked. Then she nodded. Once. The way some women in small towns nod. As if to say, "I have seen many things in my life, and I am going to ask you no questions about this one. Come with me, dear." Adeline followed her to a counter. The woman pulled up a record. She typed. She frowned. She typed more. $823.47. "I have cash." "Of course you do." She counted out the bills on the counter. The woman counted them again into a small metal tray. The transaction took 11 minutes. The receipt was a thin slip of pink paper. The woman stamped it twice. "Property is current," she said. "You're in the clear." "Thank you, ma'am. You take care of yourself." She walked out of the clerk's office and into the watery sun of a Saturday morning in November. She held the receipt in her hand for 2 blocks. A thin pink slip of paper. The first thing that had ever in her entire life been hers. She called Edmund Whitlock from the payphone outside the diner. "Mr. Whitlock, it's Adeline." "Adeline? Where are you?" "In town. I paid the taxes." A silence. A long silence. Then a sound she did not at first identify. Then she did. He was laughing. Quietly. Almost without sound. "He told me," Edmund said. "He told me you would. I never doubted him. Not once. But hearing you say it, Adeline, he would be so proud." She could not speak. "Come to my office on Monday. 10 o'clock. We will sign the paperwork. We will get the deed in your name. We will sever the lot from the main estate. Your father paid for all of it in the trust. It is already done. You just have to sign. Okay. And Adeline." "Yes, sir." "You are going to need a few things to live there. May I suggest Donovan's Hardware on Maple Street. Tell the old gentleman behind the counter that Edmund Whitlock sent you. He was your father's friend, too. He has been waiting." She hung up. She stood on the sidewalk, waiting. Everyone in this town had been waiting. Donovan's Hardware was a long, low building with a bell over the door that jingled when she walked in. The smell inside was different from any store she had ever been in. Sawdust, pipe dope, something faintly sweet like beeswax. The shelves went up to the ceiling. The aisles were narrow. A man stood behind the counter. He was tall but bent, maybe 70, maybe a little more. He had a face like an old apple and hands like a pair of catcher's mitts, and his hair was white in the places it had not gone away entirely. He looked up when the bell jingled. He saw her. He did not say anything for a second. Then, "You have your father's eyes." Her throat closed up. She nodded. He came out from behind the counter. He walked over to her. He looked at her the way old men look at things they have been thinking about for a long time. Not pity, not curiosity, just a long, settled, considered look. "I'm Silas Donovan. Adeline. I know who you are, child." He held out a hand. She shook it. His hand swallowed hers. "What do you need? A broom? A bucket? A mop? Tarp? Cleaning supplies? Mouse traps? Bleach? Trash bags? A space heater if you have one? A wool blanket? And I need to know how to patch a roof." He looked at her. He laughed. One sharp note. The way old men laugh when something has surprised them in a way they did not know they could still be surprised. "All right then," he said. "We had better get started." For the next 3 hours, Silas Donovan walked her up and down the aisles of his store. He did not chat. He did not fuss. He picked things off shelves and set them on the counter, and every now and then he would explain in 3 sentences or less why one thing was better than another thing. "Use this kind of caulk. Not that one. That one cracks in the cold. Use these gloves. Your hands are smaller than you think they are. Use this tarp. Heavier meal. The wind up here will take a cheap one apart in a week." When she pulled out the cash to pay, he held up a hand. "You're not paying full price. Mr. Donovan. Silas. Silas, I have money. My father left me money. I want to pay." He looked at her. He looked at her a long time. 20% off, he said finally. "Friends and family. That is what your father got for 41 years. That is what you get for as long as you are in this town." She did not argue. She did not have it in her to argue. She walked out of Donovan's Hardware with 2 large bags and a small space heater under her arm. And she did not cry on the sidewalk, but it was a near thing. She went back to the carriage house. She started cleaning. She did not stop for 3 days. She swept floors. She washed walls with hot water and bleach. She pried boards off windows and hauled them outside. She killed 2 mice and felt bad about it. She found a fox skull in the back corner of the ground floor and didn't know what to do with it. So she set it on the windowsill next to the dead bird, which she finally bagged up and threw away. She bought a thin mattress from a thrift store on Tuesday. She paid $18. She dragged it home on foot, 3/4 of a mile. People stared. She did not care. She bought a small refrigerator used from a man who was selling it on Craigslist. $60. He drove it over in a pickup. He carried it up the stairs for her. He looked around the room and said, "You sure you're okay out here, sweetheart?" And she said, "Yes, sir." And he had nodded and left. But she had seen him glance back twice from his truck before he drove off. The first night she slept on the mattress was the best night of sleep she had ever had. On the 5th day, there was a knock on the door. She froze. Nobody knew she was here. Nobody. She climbed down the stairs. Her heart was loud. She opened the door a crack. A woman was standing there. 65 maybe. Tall. Silver hair pinned back. A red wool coat. A casserole dish in her hands covered with foil. "Hello, dear. I'm Rosalind Vance. I live across the lane. The white farmhouse with the green door. I have been trying to figure out for 4 days whether I should mind my own business, and I have decided that I should not." Adeline blinked. "I brought you a chicken pot pie," Rosalind said. "It is still warm. I have to give it to you because if I bring it back home, my husband will eat the whole thing, and then I will be married to a man with gout." Adeline opened the door. She did not mean to. She did not plan to. She did. "I am Adeline," she said. "I know. You do." "Honey," Rosalind said kindly. "I knew your father for 30 years. Of course I know." She came inside. She looked around. She did not say anything about the dust or the smell or the fact that there was no real furniture. She walked into the kitchen. She set the casserole down on the wobbly table. She turned around. She looked at Adeline. And then, to Adeline's absolute astonishment, Rosalind Vance opened her arms. Adeline walked into them. She did not know why. She had not been hugged by an adult woman in 3 years and 7 months. Rosalind held her tight. Tight, but not too tight. The way a woman who has held many crying things in her life knows how to hold a crying thing. She smelled like soap and lavender and something faintly like flour. "There," Rosalind said softly. "There. There, there." Nothing else. Just that. When they finally separated, Adeline was wet-faced and embarrassed. "Sit down, dear," Rosalind said. "Eat. I'm going to talk for 10 minutes, and you are going to listen, and then I am going to go home, and you can go back to whatever it is you do here all day, which appears to be cleaning at an inhuman rate." Adeline sat. The chicken pot pie was the best thing she had ever eaten in her life. While she ate, Rosalind talked. She talked about Alaric Whitmore. She talked about the first time she had met him in 1985, when she and her husband had moved into the white farmhouse, and her husband had backed the moving truck into their own mailbox, and Alaric had walked across the lane and helped ride it without a word, and then invited them over for dinner. She talked about the year he and Rosalind's husband had gone fishing in Wisconsin and come back with no fish but several improbable stories. She talked about the night Adeline's mother had died, about how Alaric had called her at 3 in the morning and just said, "Rosie, she is gone." And she had come over and sat with him in his kitchen until the sun came up. She talked about how Alaric used to walk down the lane on Sunday afternoons with a little dark-haired girl on his shoulders. She talked about how that little girl used to wave at her from across the road. She talked about how she remembered her. Adeline could not finish the pot pie. "I am going to do you a favor," Rosalind said, getting up. "I am going to leave the dish. I do not want it back for at least a week. I will be too busy. And I am going to come back on Sunday with a roast, and we are going to eat dinner together, you and me, because that is what people do. And you have not done it in a long time. Do you understand me?" Adeline nodded. Rosalind put a hand on her cheek, soft, warm, the way a grandmother does. "Welcome home, child." She left. Adeline sat at the wobbly table for a long time after the door closed. She thought about her father. She thought about Rosalind. She thought about the way the town was opening slowly, like an old book that had been on a high shelf for a long time. Pages she had forgotten were unfolding around her. She thought about the wax-sealed envelope. It was still under the floorboard. She had not opened it. She had not, in fact, even looked at it again in 5 days. That night, by the light of the lantern, she made herself look. She knelt by the floorboard. She pried it up. She took out the metal box. She set it on the couch. She opened it. She moved the money aside. She picked up the small cream-colored envelope. The wax seal was unbroken. The W was perfect. She held it in her hand. She did not open it, but she looked at it. For a long time. She held it under the lantern. She turned it over. She turned it back. She set it on the table next to her father's letter. She thought, justice or peace. She did not know yet. She did not have to know yet. But she had to know that the question existed. She had to look at the envelope and not run from it. She put the envelope away. She closed the box. She slid the box back under the floor. She set the board on top. She blew out the lantern. She slept. She dreamed of her father. In the dream, he was standing in the doorway of the carriage house. He was wearing a flannel shirt and the old brown belt with the brass buckle, the one he had worn every day she had ever known him. He was not sick in the dream. He was the man from the photograph at the county fair, the one with the laughing eyes and the strong shoulders. He did not say anything. He just looked at her. The way he used to look at her when she was about to do something hard, and he was already proud of her for trying. She woke up at dawn. Her face was wet. She did not feel sad. She felt held. The next week passed in a blur of work. She sanded the wood floors with a rented machine that Silas insisted on lending her for free. She painted the walls a soft cream color, like the inside of an eggshell. She replaced 2 cracked window panes by herself after watching Silas demonstrate once, while pretending not to be impressed when she got it right on the second try. She cleaned the wood stove. She cleaned the chimney. She bought a cord of firewood from a man who agreed to deliver it for $20. On the 8th day, she lit her first fire in the wood stove. It worked. It worked beautifully. The carriage house, for the first time in 50 years, was warm. She sat on the couch in the orange light of the open stove with a wool blanket Rosalind had insisted on giving her, with the heat on her face and the smell of cedar smoke in the air, and she thought, "This is mine. This is mine. This is mine." The next morning, she went to the diner on Main Street to use the payphone again. The diner had a small window in the front. The window faced the sidewalk. She did not notice the man at the corner table. Not at first. She walked past him to the counter. She ordered a coffee, which she did not really drink, but which gave her a reason to be there. She walked to the payphone in the back hallway. She called Edmund Whitlock to ask a question about the deed she had signed on Monday. She talked for 4 minutes. She hung up. She walked back through the diner. And as she passed the corner table, she heard a voice, a familiar voice, a voice she had not heard in 3 years and 7 months. Just trying to get through this quarter, Joe. I know. The cash flow is tight. Believe me, I am aware. She stopped walking. She did not mean to stop walking. Her body stopped on its own. She turned her head. Garrett. Her brother Garrett. 3 feet from her. He was sitting alone at the corner table in a blue cashmere coat with the collar turned up. He had a phone pressed to his ear. There was an espresso in front of him. He looked older than she remembered, heavier in the face, tired around the eyes. He glanced up. He saw her. Her heart stopped. It actually stopped. It picked up again 2 beats later, slamming against her ribs like a fist. He looked at her. He looked. And he did not see her. His eyes slid over her face, past her, through her, the way you look at a stranger in a coffee shop who has accidentally caught your eye while you are on the phone. He gave her the tiny automatic dismissive nod that strangers give each other in passing. Then he looked back down at his espresso and kept talking. I told you, Joe. The Atherton account is going to come through. We just need to hold on for 30 more days. 30 days. She stood there. She stood there for what felt like a year. He did not look up again. 3 years. 3 years and 7 months. And he did not know her. His own sister. Her father's daughter. The little girl he had once carried around on his shoulders at her 6th birthday party. He did not see her. She walked out of the diner. She did not remember her feet moving. She did not remember opening the door. She remembered the bell. The bell jingled. The cold hit her face. She walked. She walked until she got to the alley behind the dry cleaners. Then she stopped. She put her hand against the brick wall, and she made a sound. Not a cry. Not exactly. Something deeper. Something that came from a place she did not know she had. A sound like a small animal that has been hit once very hard. She stayed there for a long time. She thought about going back. She thought about walking into the diner and grabbing him by the collar of his cashmere coat and putting her face in front of his face and saying his own name and her own name and watching him remember. She did not. She breathed. She walked home. The carriage house was warm when she came in. The fire in the stove was still burning. The space smelled like cedar and clean wool. She closed the door behind her. She leaned against it. She slid to the floor. She sat there for an hour. She thought about the wax-sealed envelope. She thought about how easy it would be. One phone call. One drive to the FBI office in Chicago. One. Just one. But she thought about her father. She thought about what he had said. The path of justice is not the path of peace. She thought about Rosalind's chicken pot pie. She thought about Silas Donovan saying, "You have your father's eyes." She thought about the warm fire in the wood stove. She thought about the photo of herself at 3 years old on the shelf. She thought, she thought, she thought. And finally, slowly, she got up. She lit the lantern. She made herself a cup of tea on the small 2-burner camping stove she had set up in the kitchenette. She sat by the fire. She did not decide yet, but she sat with the question, like a guest in her house, like a thing she had to learn to live with for a while. The fire burned low. She added a log. The fire burned bright again. And somewhere in the back of her mind, in the deepest place where her father's voice still lived and would always live, she heard him saying, "You always knew how to find things. Spark plug. The hardest things. The truest things. The things nobody else could see." Outside, the November wind moved through the maples. Inside, Adeline Whitmore sat alone by a small good fire, in a small good room in a small good house that her father had hidden for her at the end of his life, like a secret he could not say out loud. And she did not yet know what she was going to choose, but she knew for the first time since she was 15 years old. That choosing was hers. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, there was another knock on her door. She came down the stairs. She opened the door. A woman was standing there. Tall, slender, 68 or so. Her white hair pulled back into a small bun at the back of her neck. A long gray wool coat. A leather handbag. Sensible black shoes that had been polished that morning, Adeline could tell, because they caught the early light. The woman looked at Adeline. Her eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall. She did not say hello. She said, very quietly, "My name is Cordelia Sinclair. I worked for your father for 25 years. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you, Adeline. May I come in?" Adeline did not speak. She could not. She stepped aside, and she let the woman in. Cordelia Sinclair stepped into the carriage house. She stopped in the middle of the room. She looked around. Slowly. The way a woman who has been on a long journey looks at a place she has finally reached. She did not cry. Not yet. But her hand went to her mouth and her eyes moved over the cream-painted walls and the clean floors and the small fire in the wood stove. And she nodded once like a person confirming something to herself. "He told me," she said. Her voice was soft. "He told me you would do this." Adeline did not know what to say, so she said the only thing she could. "Would you like tea?" Cordelia smiled. The smile was small. The smile was old. It was the smile of a woman who had been holding her breath for 3 years and was only now starting to remember how to let it out. "I would love tea, dear." Adeline made tea on the camping stove. Her hands shook a little. She watched them shake. She watched them and she thought calmly, almost from outside herself, "Look at that. My hands are shaking." She poured the boiling water carefully. She found 2 mugs. She had bought them at the thrift store. One had a chip on the rim. One said, World's Best Grandpa in faded blue letters. She gave the World's Best Grandpa mug to Cordelia. She kept the chipped one for herself. They sat at the wobbly table. Cordelia held the mug in both hands. She did not drink. She just looked at Adeline, and then she said, "You were 3 years old the last time I held you in my arms. You were wearing a yellow dress. You had taken one of my hairpins out of my hair, and you would not give it back. You said, 'I want this. I want this. I want this.' And your father laughed for 10 minutes because you had said it so seriously like a queen." Adeline laughed, a small surprise sound. "I don't remember that. You were 3, child. You do not remember most of what was the best of your life. That is the cruelty of small children. They live in heaven and then forget it." Adeline looked at her. She felt something in her chest, something warm, something almost frightening. A feeling like walking into a room and finding that someone has been waiting for you and you did not know anyone had been waiting. "Why are you here?" Adeline asked, quietly. Cordelia set her mug down. "Because your father asked me to be." "Not yet," he said. "Not until she comes back. Not until she finds the box. Not until she calls Edmund. Then you may go. Then you may meet her." "He told you about all of this." "He told me about all of it. Even the floor. I helped him build the hiding place, child. I was there the day he put the box in. I held the floorboard while he hammered." Adeline stared. "You. Me. You knew. The whole time. I knew. You knew where I was." "I knew." Adeline's hand went tight around the chipped mug. "You knew. You knew the whole time I was in the system. You knew I was at Grayson. You knew I knew. Then why?" It came out as a small broken word. "Why didn't you come?" Cordelia closed her eyes. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened her eyes. She looked straight at Adeline. "Because I promised your father I would not. Because if I had come, your brothers would have known there was something to find. Because Alaric Whitmore went to his grave protecting you. And I was not going to be the one who undid that protection in the last mile. Because I loved your father, Adeline. I loved him for 25 years. He was the kindest man I have ever known. He asked one thing of me. I gave him my word. And I have kept my word." A pause. Almost. She reached into her handbag. She pulled out a small leather notebook. She slid it across the wobbly table. Adeline looked at it. Cordelia said, "I went to Grayson twice a year. Every June. Every December. I did not go inside. I did not speak to you. I stood at the gate. I waited until you came out for recess. I watched you for 10 minutes. I wrote down what I saw. I went home. I told no one. I did this for 3 years." She tapped the notebook. "This is the notebook." Adeline could not breathe. She opened the notebook. The first page was dated June of 3 years ago. The handwriting was small, tight, elegant. The handwriting of a woman who had been raised to write thank you notes. She read, June 14th. She came out at 2:40. She is taller. She has cut her hair. She is wearing a blue sweatshirt that is too big in the shoulders. She talked to one of the other girls for 2 minutes. She walked alone for the rest of the recess. Her shoulders are tense. She is surviving. She is still herself. Alaric, she is still our girl. Adeline read the next entry, and the next, and the next. December. June, December, June, December, June. 6 entries. 3 years. A woman she did not know had stood at a gate twice a year for 3 years and watched her at recess and gone home and written down what she had seen as if Adeline were a daughter who lived in a country with no postal service. Adeline put her head down on the wobbly table. She made a sound she did not recognize. Cordelia reached across the table and put her hand on Adeline's hair. She did not say there. 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 She did not say anything. She just left her hand there, warm, steady, while the girl cried herself empty. After a long time, Adeline sat up. Her face was a wreck. She did not care. Cordelia handed her a handkerchief. Cloth, embroidered with a small letter S in the corner. Of course it was cloth. Of course it was embroidered. Adeline wiped her face. You drove all that way. I took the train. You took the train. To stand at a gate. I would have taken the train forever, child. A silence. Then Cordelia said, Your father wrote me a letter, too. He gave it to me a month before he died. He told me, Cordelia, when she finds the carriage house, when she finds the box, when she begins, then you may go to her, and not before. Promise me. She paused. I promised. And you came on the 11th day. You found the box on the night you arrived, child. I came on the 11th day because I'm a patient woman and I wanted to make sure you had a week with him alone with his letter. Before I came in and complicated things, I owed you that. He owed you that. Adeline laughed. A real laugh this time. A laugh through tears. You are a careful woman, Mrs. Sinclair. I have been called many things, dear. I will accept careful. They sat for a while. The fire crackled. Outside, a cardinal landed in the dogwood tree by the door. Cordelia looked at it. She said, Your father loved cardinals. I know. He used to say they were good luck. I know. He used to put suet in a little wire cage by the back door just to bring them in. Your brother Garrett, when he was 8 years old, took down the cage and threw it in the woods because he said it was attracting too many birds, and the birds were annoying him. Your father didn't get angry. He just walked into the woods. He got the cage back. He put it back up. He looked at Garrett, he said, Son, we do not throw away things that are beautiful just because they are loud. Adeline listened, and Garrett said, They are only birds, Dad. They do not matter. A pause. I think about that sometimes. I think your father heard in that one sentence from an 8-year-old boy the whole story of what was going to happen. I think he never stopped hearing it. Adeline did not speak. What was there to say? Cordelia took a sip of her tea. Finally. This is good tea. It is the cheap kind. Good tea is good tea. She put the mug down. I am going to make you an offer, Adeline. Okay, I live alone. I have lived alone since my husband died 11 years ago. I have a small apartment over the bookstore in town. I have no children. I have a sister in California I do not speak to. I have my church and my garden and a great deal of free time. I would like if you would have me to stay here for a while. Not in this house. I can rent a room from Rosalind across the lane. She would have me in a heartbeat. She has been asking me for 10 years. But I would like to be close. I would like to come here every day. I would like to cook for you. I would like to teach you the things your father wanted me to teach you, the things he ran out of time to teach you. I would like if you will let me to be in your life. Adeline did not answer right away. She looked at this woman, this 68-year-old woman with her sensible shoes and her embroidered handkerchief and her 3-year-old notebook of recess sightings. A woman who had been waiting for her. A woman who was asking. Yes, Adeline said. Just one word. Yes, please. Cordelia nodded. Once. Slow. Then she stood up. She walked around the table. She put her arms around Adeline Whitmore, 18 years old, who had not been held by her mother since she was 4, and who had not been held by her father in 3 years and 7 months, and who had not been held by any woman anywhere for any reason since she was 15. Cordelia held her. Cordelia rocked her just slightly. The way a woman who has spent her life around babies rocks a child whether or not the child needs rocking. Adeline cried into her coat, and the November wind moved through the maples outside, and somewhere a cardinal sang, and inside the carriage house at the back of the Whitmore estate, 2 women held each other and shook with the weight of all the things that had not been said for a very long time. The weeks that followed were the strangest and the best of Adeline's life. Cordelia moved into Rosalind's spare bedroom across the lane. This was a thing that happened. With the suitcases. With the carrying. With Rosalind's husband, a quiet man named Henry, hauling a heavy trunk up a narrow staircase and pretending not to be winded. And Cordelia patting his arm and saying, "Sit down, Henry, before you fall down." And Henry laughing and sitting down. Cordelia walked across the lane every morning at 7. She brought biscuits. She brought eggs. She brought a small enamel coffee pot and the specific kind of coffee her father had drunk for 40 years, a dark French roast from a small roaster in Madison. She brewed it on the camping stove. She poured Adeline a cup. She poured one for herself. They sat at the wobbly table and they drank their coffee, and they did not always talk. That was the part Adeline loved most. She had not known you could sit with another person and not talk and not be lonely. She learned. Cordelia taught her to make pot roast the way her father liked it. 3 carrots, 2 onions, a whole head of garlic not peeled, a bottle of dark beer poured in at the last minute. She taught her how to fold towels properly with the fold facing out so the linen closet looked tidy. She taught her how to write a thank you note. She taught her how to address a letter. She taught her how to say no to a man who was trying to sell her something she did not want. She taught her mostly by example that a woman could be old and quiet and still be powerful. Silas Donovan came by every few days. He always pretended he was just stopping by. He always had a reason a tool he had forgotten to send home with her, a scrap of trim he thought she could use, a bag of bird seed because he had noticed the cardinals and figured she would want to feed them. Sometimes he stayed for coffee. Sometimes he stayed for dinner. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, he and Cordelia and Adeline would sit by the fire. The three of them and Silas would tell some old story about Alaric, and Cordelia would correct him on a detail. And Silas would laugh and say, "You know, Cordy, you are the only person on God's earth who could correct me on a story about my own friend." And Cordelia would say, "And yet I keep doing it." And Silas would shake his head and laugh some more. Rosalind came on Sundays. She brought a roast, sometimes a pie. She brought her husband, Henry, who did not say much, but who fixed the broken hinge on the kitchen cabinet without being asked. She brought local gossip. She brought the warmth of a woman who had loved Adeline's father and was now very quietly choosing to love Adeline. The carriage house began to look like a home. The floors gleamed. The walls held warm light. There were curtains in the windows, now faded gingham ones that Cordelia had hemmed by hand. There was a real bed upstairs, a small one with quilts that Rosalind had brought down from her attic. There was a kitchen with 3 pots and 4 spoons and 1 rolling pin, and that was enough. There were photographs on the shelf over the stove. Adeline at 3 with the yellow stuffed duck. Adeline at 7 on the back of her father's pickup truck. Alaric and Cordelia and a thin woman Adeline did not recognize standing in the garden of the big house in 1992. Alaric and Adeline at a baseball game in 2014, both of them holding hot dogs. There was a small garden patch out front. Adeline had dug it herself. Silas had brought her bulbs from his cellar. Daffodils, crocus, tulips. She had planted them in November and would not see them until April. And that, Cordelia said, was the whole point of planting bulbs. You plant them in the dark. You wait. You trust that the dark is doing its work. The bulbs came up. So did Adeline. She got a job at the public library on Maple Street. 20 hours a week. She shelved books. She helped old women find biographies. She read to the 4-year-olds on Tuesday mornings, and they sat in a small half circle and watched her face the way little children watch faces with their whole bodies. She made $15 an hour. It was, in her judgment, the best money anyone had ever paid for anything. The wax-sealed envelope stayed under the floorboard. She did not open it. She did not throw it away. She had not decided yet. She had let the question live in her house in the floor the way her father had told her to. She walked over that floorboard 10 times a day. She did not look down. But she knew. She always knew. It was there. 23 days after Cordelia had walked into her life on a cold afternoon in early December, with snow flurries in the air and a small fire in the stove, there was a knock on the door. Adeline was alone. Cordelia had walked into town to mail a letter to her sister in California, who was finally going to be called whether she wanted to be or not. Adeline looked at the door. She knew the sound. She had never heard that knock before in her life, but she knew it. It was a knock that meant, "Open up." Her stomach went small. Her breath went short. She walked to the door. She put her hand on the latch. She paused. She thought, "You are in your own house. You are 18 years old. You have paid taxes on this land. You have a friend who is across the lane. You have a friend who will come home in 20 minutes. You have a friend who lives down the road. You are not alone. She opened the door. 2 men were standing on her step. The older one was Garrett. The younger one was Tobias. Her brothers. Both of them. In the flesh. 3 years and 7 months. Garrett opened his mouth to say something, then stopped. Then he looked at her. Really looked. His face changed. It went pale. It went still. "Adeline," he said. She did not say anything. He stared. Toby behind him took a small, involuntary step backward. Garrett's eyes moved. Over her face. Over her clothes. Over her hair. He was trying to put together a face he had not seen in 3 years, with a face he was looking at now. He was trying to make the math work. She watched him do it. She did not help. "My God," Garrett said very quietly. "Addie." She stepped back from the door, but not an invitation, just in space. "What are you doing here?" she said. Her voice was flat. It was, she noticed distantly, her father's voice when he was about to fire someone. Calm, quiet, absolute. Garrett tried to smile. The smile did not work. It came across like a man trying to hold a wet bar of soap. "We heard. There was someone living back here. We were. We did not know it was you. Addie, we had no idea. You did not know it was me. No, you did not know that the building Dad left to me had me in it." A pause. A very small flicker of something in Garrett's eyes. He did not. He didn't tell us. About the carriage house. It was. There was a codicil. Yes. But we thought. Addie, we thought it was a token. We thought it was nothing. We had no idea you would. Come back. You thought it was nothing. It is. It was. It is a ruin. Addie, look at this place." She looked. She looked at her painted walls, and her hemmed curtains, and her photographs, and her wood stove, and her geraniums in the windowsill, which she had bought for $2 at the farmer's market last Saturday. She looked back at him. "I am looking," she said. He did not know what to do with that. He glanced at Toby. Toby had still not spoken. Toby was looking at the floor. Toby was 28 years old, and he was looking at the floor like an 8-year-old boy in the principal's office. Garrett shifted his weight. "Addie, can we come in? Just for a minute, please. We have so much too. There is so much to talk about. We have all been worried about you. We did not know where you were. We tried to find you. We..." Stop. It came out very quietly, but it stopped him. "You did not try to find me, Garrett. Addie, you did not call. You did not write. You did not visit. You did not pay $1 of child support. You did not send one birthday card. You did not ever even one time in 3 years ask the state of Illinois where I was." He opened his mouth. She held up her hand. "And yesterday morning I sat 3 feet from you in the diner, and you looked at me, and you did not know who I was." He went pale again. You were at the diner. I was at the payphone. I walked past you. You looked at me. You did not see me. Garrett, you did not even see me." He had no answer, because there was no answer. Toby finally looked up. Toby looked at her, and for the first time in 3 years, Adeline saw something in his eyes that almost broke her. Something small, something ashamed, something young. Toby said very quietly, "Addie, I am so sorry." It was the first sincere thing she had heard from either of them in 7 years. She nodded at him, just once. She turned back to Garrett. Garrett had gathered himself. "Adeline," he said in a voice she recognized from when she was 12, and he was explaining to her with great patience why she could not have a kitten. "I can see that you are upset. I understand. We have all made mistakes. The thing is, Adeline, this carriage house, look, it is sitting on the corner of the estate. It is. There is an easement issue. There are utilities. There are, frankly, liability concerns. We would like to make you an offer, a fair offer, above market value. We would like to buy the lot from you and give you a real start, real money. Enough to go to college, Adeline. Enough to live anywhere you want. Anywhere. We have already spoken to a man at the bank. We can have a check in your hand by Friday." She looked at him. She did not move. She did not blink. "How much?" "I think we can do 30,000. 30,000. It is a generous offer, Adeline. For 1/10 of an acre and a brick building in Hawthorne Ridge. It is a difficult property. It is a ruin, really. You see that?" "I see it." A pause. A long pause. She heard behind her the soft click of the front gate. Cordelia was coming up the path. Adeline could hear the small, even steps, the careful tread of a woman in sensible shoes who has been listening for the first time to wind in maples for many years. Adeline did not turn around. She kept her eyes on Garrett. "Garrett," she said. "Calm. Quiet. Absolute. You have the entire estate. You have the house. You have the cars. You have the business. You have everything that was ever ours. And you came here today to ask me on the doorstep of the one thing my father set aside for me, if you could have that too." He flinched. "You came here," she said, "to take the last thing he gave me. Adeline, that is not what. This is mine." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "My father left this to me. He did it on purpose. He did it because he knew you. He did it because he knew when he was dying what you were already becoming. He gave me a small thing, the smallest thing he had. And you came here to take it." Garrett's mouth was open. She heard Cordelia's step behind her, right behind her. Cordelia did not say anything. She did not have to. Adeline felt her there, like a stone wall, like a hand on her back without the hand. Adeline stood taller. "I am not selling," she said. "Not to you, not for 30,000, not for 300,000, not for any amount of money you will ever in your life be able to put on a check. You can leave now." "Addie, get off my porch." She did not yell. She had never yelled at him in her life. She did not start now. But the 4 words came out of her like a door closing. Garrett opened his mouth one more time. Toby reached out and put a hand on Garrett's arm. "Garrett," Toby said, "let's go." Garrett looked at his brother. He blinked. Toby's hand on his arm seemed to confuse him. He looked at Adeline. Then he turned. He walked off the porch. Toby followed. At the edge of the path, Toby looked back, just once. His eyes found Adeline's eyes. He did not say anything. He did not have to. She nodded at him. He nodded at her. And then he turned and followed his brother through the gate. Adeline closed the door. She stood with her forehead against the door. She breathed. In, out, in, out. Cordelia came up behind her. She did not touch her. She just stood there. A presence. A wall. After a long time, Adeline turned. She looked at Cordelia. Cordelia looked at her. Cordelia said, "Your father just heard you." Adeline did not speak. She walked across the room. She knelt by the couch. She lifted the floorboard. She took the metal box out from under the floor. She set it on the wobbly table. She opened it. She moved the money aside. She picked up the wax-sealed envelope. The W on the wax seal was perfect. She held the envelope in her hand for a long time. Cordelia watched. Cordelia did not speak. After a while, Cordelia said very softly, "Adeline, whatever you decide, I am with you." Adeline did not answer. She walked to the wood stove. She opened the small iron door. The fire was low, just embers, glowing red and breathing slow. She held the envelope over the fire. She felt the heat on her fingers. She thought. She thought about Garrett's face in the diner, the way it had slid over hers without seeing. She thought about her father in the dream standing in the doorway in his flannel shirt. She thought about Toby's eyes at the gate. She thought about Cordelia's notebook. She thought about Rosalind's chicken pot pie. She thought about Silas saying, "You have your father's eyes." She thought about the bulbs in the dark earth outside her door, waiting through the winter to come up in April. And then she let go. The wax-sealed envelope dropped into the embers. It curled. It blackened. It caught. A small, bright flame ate it from the inside out. The W on the seal melted last, a small bead of red wax that ran for 1 second, and then was gone. The envelope became ash. The ash drifted up the chimney. Adeline closed the iron door. She stood there. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel righteous. She felt light. She felt for the first time in 7 years that her hands were her own. She turned. Cordelia was sitting at the table. Cordelia was crying, quietly, without sound. Cordelia said, "He would be so proud of you, child." Adeline walked to her. She knelt by her chair. She put her head on Cordelia's lap. Cordelia stroked her hair. The cardinal in the dogwood tree outside the window sang a small, bright song. The fire in the stove burned warm, and outside the first real snow of the year began to fall slowly, softly in big, slow flakes that caught in the bare branches of the maples and would still be there in the morning. But the story was not finished. Not yet. It ends where stories like this always end, which is later in a season that is not the same season, with people who are not quite the same people doing things that the people who started the story could not have imagined. 2 months after Adeline burned the envelope, an article ran in the Chicago Tribune. The headline was small. It did not make the front page. It made the bottom of page 7 of the business section. It said, "Whitmore Industries under SEC investigation. Allegations of fraud, shell corporations." Adeline read it on a Tuesday morning at the library. She sat at the reference desk. She read the whole article. It mentioned wire transfers. It mentioned offshore accounts. It mentioned an internal whistleblower whose identity had not been disclosed. It mentioned that the SEC had been investigating for nearly 14 months. 14 months. The investigation had begun before Adeline ever left the group home. Her father had not been the only person who knew. Of course he had not. Men like Garrett, who steal millions of dollars from companies that bear their own name, get caught not because their sisters turn them in. They get caught because greed is greedy, and they cannot stop. And somewhere a bookkeeper notices something, and the bookkeeper tells someone, and the someone tells someone else. And the world has its own long, slow, patient way of pulling weeds. The federal indictment came down 6 months later. Garrett was sentenced to 9 years. Toby was sentenced to 4. Toby took a plea. Toby cooperated. Toby, the small voice in the doorway at her front porch. The boy who had said, "Addie, I am sorry." The man who had finally found his spine on his sister's threshold, did the right thing for once in his life. He testified. He gave the FBI everything he had been hiding for 10 years. He wrote Adeline a letter from prison. 1 letter. 3 pages. She read it once. She did not write back, but she did not throw the letter away. She put it in a drawer. Someday, maybe. The civil case took longer. The estate was clawed back. Most of it. The big house at 412 Cedar Hollow Lane was sold to a doctor and his husband, a quiet couple from Boston, who restored the porch and planted hydrangeas and waved at Adeline whenever they saw her on the lane. Adeline received, after legal fees and taxes, and the long, slow grinding of the wheels, a check for $1,400,000. She did not at first know what to do with it. She thought about it for a year. Then, on the 2nd anniversary of the day she had turned 18, she walked into the Hawthorne Ridge Town Hall, and she filed papers to open a nonprofit, the Sparkplug Foundation, a small organization, a scholarship fund for girls aging out of the foster care system in the state of Illinois. The foundation had 3 trustees: Cordelia Sinclair, Rosalind Vance, Silas Donovan. The foundation gave away every year $25,000 in starter grants, $5,000 each to 5 girls, to pay first month's rent, to buy a used car, to fix the heat on an apartment they had been crying in. to get a deposit down on a place that did not smell like bleach and boiled cabbage. The carriage house got bigger. Adeline knocked out the wall between the kitchenette and the main room. She put in a real kitchen. She put in real heat. She kept the wood stove. She added a real bedroom upstairs and turned the old apartment into a small reading library. Books lined the walls. Donated books mostly. Books Rosalind brought from yard sales. Books Silas found in the basement of the hardware store. Books Cordelia bought at the bookstore on Maple Street and pretended she had found at a thrift. Children came on Saturdays. Adeline opened the library to the children of Hawthorne Ridge on Saturday afternoons. She read to them. She made them hot chocolate. She let them sit on the floor. The room filled with small bodies and small voices and the warm smell of marshmallows. A girl named Maya came every week. Maya was 11 years old. Maya lived at the Grayson Group Home for Girls. Adeline had signed up to be a big sister through a state mentorship program. She had asked specifically for a girl from Grayson. She had asked for Maya after meeting her once. Maya came to the carriage house every Saturday afternoon. Adeline drove into Chicago to pick her up. Cordelia made her lunch. Silas taught her how to use a hammer. Rosalind taught her how to bake a pie. The first time Maya saw the carriage house, she stood in the middle of the room and looked around. Slowly, the way Cordelia had once. A child who has seen many rooms looking at one that is gonna matter. Maya said, "This is the nicest place I have ever been." Adeline said, "It used to be a ruin." Maya said, "What's a ruin?" Adeline thought about that. She said, "It is a place people forget until someone comes back." Maya nodded. Maya thought about that. Maya said, "Then it isn't a ruin anymore, is it?" And Adeline said, "No, sweetheart. Then it is a home." 5 years passed, then 6, then 7. Cordelia Sinclair died in her sleep in the spring of the 7th year. She was 75. Adeline was 25. The funeral was small. The church was full. Adeline gave the eulogy. She talked mostly about a notebook. She talked about a woman who had stood at a gate for 3 years. She talked about cardinals. Silas Donovan retired. He sold the hardware store to a young couple from Wisconsin who promised to keep it the same. He moved in with his daughter in Ohio. He sent Adeline a Christmas card every year until the year he stopped. And Adeline drove to Ohio for that funeral too. Rosalind Vance lived to be 91. Maya grew up. Maya went to community college, then to nursing school on a Spark Plug Foundation grant. Maya became a pediatric nurse. Maya named her first daughter Adeline. The carriage house at the back of 412 Cedar Hollow Lane stayed. The doctor and his husband at the main house planted a small grove of dogwoods between the two buildings, so that in April the path between them was a tunnel of white flowers. Cardinals lived in the dogwoods. Adeline fed them suet from a small wire cage by her back door. And sometimes late in the afternoon, when the light came through the windows in long golden bars, and the fire crackled in the wood stove, and a cardinal sang in the dogwood, outside Adeline Whitmore, who was no longer 18 years old, who was no longer afraid, who was no longer alone, would sit at her wobbly table. She would drink a cup of dark French roast coffee from a chip mug. She would look at the photograph on the shelf above the stove, the man holding the little girl on his shoulders at the county fair, both of them laughing, She would lift her mug. She would say very quietly just to him, "Thank you, Daddy." And outside the wind would move through the maples, and inside the small good fire would burn warm. And the story, the way stories like this always do, would keep going. In the bulbs under the snow, in the books on the shelves, in the children on the floor on Saturday afternoons, in every girl who got a check and a key and a chance, in every quiet woman who chose in the dark in the long winter of her life to plant something she could not yet see. Because that in the end is what an inheritance is. Not the money, not the house, not the name, but the choice. The choice your father leaves you. The choice you finally slowly, painfully, beautifully make.